in a contest between what I would like the world to look like and what the world actually is. Reality wins every time. And what we're going to see, which is the title of this podcast, getting you ready for summer blackouts, is that reality is going to start hitting more and more people around this country this summer.
First article I want to discuss, which comes from the Wall Street Journal. It's an article titled "Your Coming Summer of Blackouts." So the author of this piece talks about a recently released assessment forecast from the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, or NERC. Is that how you pronounce it, Isaac?
That's correct.
NERC. The assessment forecasts that roughly 2/3 of the United States is at risk of suffering power outages during the coming summer heat. This includes just about everyone living west of the Mississippi River. So, Isaac, that seems like a big chunk of the United States that's at risk of blackouts during the summer. Are the NERC forecasts always this dire, or is this particularly bad?
It's particularly bad, and it's been getting worse over the last several years. Most of the listeners may not know this, but I used to work at Heartland. I was there from, I think it was 2014 until 2018 when I jumped ship and came over to American Experiment. But the last year that I was doing stuff for Heartland, I was talking about how we need to preserve these existing coal-fired power plants that have been shut down over the last 5 years. And when we talked about, this is going to, if we shut these down, we're going to undermine the reliability of the grid. Everyone just laughed at you and said, you're a climate denier, you're stupid, essentially, right? And really, the chickens have come home to roost in a lot of ways. We haven't had the blackouts yet, but all of the signs are pointing towards if we have a widespread heat wave in the United States, there's not going to be enough juice to keep everything going.
I fear that we're on a path where we're going to routinely receive text alerts from the government, or flex alerts, as they're called in California, asking people to limit their energy usage over the next, 8 to 12 hours or something, like we have seen in California. Or perhaps your smart thermostat in your house will lock you out of being able to set your air conditioning below 80 degrees, like that story in Colorado, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. Or perhaps limitations will be placed on commercial businesses, restricting them from using too much energy to cool their stores, like that story out of Spain that we've talked about before. So, Jim, do you think this is the path we're on? Are stories like this inevitably going to be the norm for us?
Of course, it's the path we're on. And that's what listeners to this podcast know very well. We just keep taking more coal and natural gas power plants offline and replacing them with, and you should put that in air quotes, replacing them with wind and solar. Wind, of course, obviously solar doesn't work on when the sun goes down, which is half the day, and wind doesn't work unless it's actually blowing just perfectly. I think only about 20% of the time are you actually getting usable energy from wind. And you can't take all of this reliable energy offline and replace it with unreliable energy and think that we're going to continue to live as we have for our entire lives. We're talking about destroying our energy system in this country while also outlawing the use of any natural gas stuff at all, in your home. New York State and California are poised to ban the installation of any gas-fired appliances in your home if you're building a new home. So no gas stoves, no gas furnaces, no gas water heaters are all going to be replaced by electric. California is going to outlaw the internal combustion engine for all intents and purposes, at least new ones. They will not allow new cars built with an internal combustion engine to be sold in that state. You can't impose these policies, which would require much more electricity to be used by the American people, and not build any more capacity, because we're not building any more nuclear. If you were going to go against the market and force people to have everything electric, and you wanted them to actually have a lifestyle that is somewhat similar to what they're enjoying now, you would go nuclear all across the country. We're not doing this because we're run by ideological idiots and they want you to suffer. So we're going to super ramp up demand for electricity while super diminishing our ability to generate reliable electricity. Blackouts and brownouts are inevitable, and they're coming faster than anybody would have even guessed 2 years ago, thanks to the policies of this Biden administration.
I'm just kind of curious as to your thoughts, Justin, on this idea of just like the energy rationing that we're seemingly going headlong into.
Yeah, one of the things that I've always been very interested in is really trying to understand what people on the left, not the sort of radical environmentalists who just don't care about any of this because they would prefer we just don't even use energy. A lot of them, or at least to significantly cut it, they'd be fine with that, or to have fewer humans, they'd be fine with that, or for us to live in smaller spaces, they'd be fine with that, to drive our car less, they'd be fine with that. But what about like just your run of the mill, sort of middle of the road Democrat, or, certain Republicans or independents that also kind of feel strongly about this. The ones who are in office in particular, who should be a little more educated on this, maybe they're not, but they should be, the math and the science on this is settled. It's going to happen. It's not a question of, it's just math. It's just basic math. All you have to do is look at the production. You can project things out. You can project out consumption and do all this stuff. And you can figure out what we're capable of powering and what we're not capable of powering and what that's going to look like in the future. And it's not going to be exact, but you can get a rough picture of that. And a lot of people like Isaac and others have been doing that for a long time. And it seems like no matter how many reports they put out, a lot of people just look at it and say, we're still going to go in the other direction. We don't care what the math says, and we don't care what the science says, and we don't care what the basic laws of physics. It doesn't matter to us. We're just going to keep going in this other direction. At some point, though, they have to know that when we're going to reach a level where we're going to be so dependent on wind and solar if they get their way. And maybe they think they'll never get their way, but we'll be so dependent on wind and solar at some point that the amount of problems that are going to come from that are going to be so extreme that they're going to face some backlash for that. And I want to know what is going through these people's minds, because unlike with conventional energy, like with energy sources like coal or natural gas or nuclear power, where if you needed to build more, you can build it just about anywhere, and you can do it in a relatively small space. But with wind and solar, you need like massive amounts of land. You need the right kind of conditions. You need new transmission lines all over the place. Like, people are that's not going to happen. You're not going to get to a point where you say, you know what? We're having too many power problems, so let's just build a lot more of this and take up a lot more land and have a lot more issue, because you're going to have all these people fighting it, not in my backyard types and all of that. And so I just don't even understand what the plan is if they actually get their way. All I can think of is that they don't actually believe that day is ever going to happen. And so they just keep saying, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. And they know it will never happen. And so they just hope the problem doesn't become so big that they get blamed for it. But I honestly can't even figure out what is going through their minds on that, because it is so clear.
When you look at what NERC says, like below the headline, it says too many coal plants are retiring. Wind and solar aren't able to replace them on a 1-to-1 basis, which is what, anyone with a brain knows. But like the left is going to say that like the blackouts aren't because we closed down too many reliable power plants in an entirely foreseeable way. It's because of climate change, right? Like, climate change caused extreme weather. The extreme weather caused the blackout, because like when we do have the blackout, it's probably going to be during either a very hot period or a very cold period, right? So like, that's just when things break, during extreme temperatures. So like, they will blame climate change on that. So their solution to having a grid that is susceptible to interruption during extreme weather events is to make a grid that's more prone to fluctuations in the weather, which is like the dumbest thing possible, right? So Jim absolutely nailed it when he talks about how the policies that are being enacted on a state and federal level are burning the reliability candle at both ends. We're simultaneously closing down the plants that we can rely upon to produce electricity, while also like causing our demand to skyrocket.
Just put it this way. If we need oil, and we do need oil, We need petroleum. We need plastics. We need also petroleum is not just turning into gasoline or fuel oil. Petroleum is used for almost everything in your house right now. So we will not stop drilling for oil. If you were going to drill for oil, where would you rather have it done? If you're an environmentalist, if you care about the ecology of the earth, if you care about having it done with the least environmental damage possible, would you rather that drilling be done in the United States or Brazil? If you were going to mine for the now, if we go to this so-called green economy, if you're going to mine for the rare earth minerals that are necessary to build all these batteries, the mining necessary to make all of the batteries as we electrify everything, we don't even know that there's enough copper that we know where it's at, where we can get it to make a lot of these batteries and the electrification, or I should say copper, especially for the transmission lines. We don't have it. And so, but if it was possible to do that, where would you rather have that done? In the United States with our strict environmental regulations that make sure that mining causes the least amount of environmental damage possible, or in China or in the Congo? This is why the arguments of the environmentalists are, if you give them the benefit of the doubt, they are naive.
Right.
If you look at it more clearly, they want to punish the United States. If you wanted to punish the United States for its success, you would be doing exactly all of these things. And you're allowing China, the dirtiest country on earth, with slave labor, to create this new wonderful green utopia that we're going to have. You need to open your eyes, and you need to open the eyes of these people that are maybe just passively green and think these are all good ideas. They are not. China is going to take over the world because we're just going to hand them the keys and hand them our economies and hand them the control of energy around the globe. Who in their right mind thinks that's remotely a good idea? Wacky environmental lefties do, and people in power here in the United States and with the World Economic Forum who want to diminish the power of the United States and diminish your freedom think it's a good idea. Nobody who thinks rationally thinks any of this makes any sense.
No, I mean, the thing that's so crazy about all of this is that there is literally no chance. I mean, literally no chance that anything that we do in the United States is going to fix this problem. Like, it just isn't going to happen. And so what's so bizarre about this debate is that, earlier we mentioned, well, what the left says is that if we don't do something about climate change and we don't, make our power system, completely overhaul our power system, then we're going to have hotter and hotter weather, and that's going to cause all these problems and all of that. But that is meaningless because of what we're seeing in China, as you're referencing. So in China, in India, in other parts of the developing world, the amount of carbon dioxide emissions that are being added into the atmosphere as a result of their development, which is lifting people out of poverty, by the way, in many cases, is so much more than anything that we can cut here that it is irrelevant. And so, again, I go, maybe this is all just, I keep going back to this same point, but what are these people thinking? I mean, at the end of the day, total CO2 emissions are going to keep going up. That is not going to, so even if you believe that CO2 emissions is like a little dial and you can just turn the dial up and down and that will change weather and that will stop hurricanes and whatever. Like, let's say you believe that. It doesn't matter because we don't have our hand on the biggest dial like
right.
that. So who cares? And so literally we are destroying our energy system. We are making it more unreliable by the day. Also, that we can have absolutely zero effect on climate change in the long run. It's actually zero. So the only rational, thing that you can do if you're on the left and you take this position that CO2 emissions are going to kill everybody is to start with China and start with India. And then after you're done convincing them to cut their CO2 emissions, then you can come talk to me. Until then, I don't want to hear from you because it's irrelevant.
I get that, Justin, but there are tons of normie voters out there that have been conditioned to think that wind and solar are good, right? That's just you don't even question that. You just know that wind and solar are good. And it sounds really good in theory, to be honest. Oh, wind is free, sun is free. Yeah, let's use that. They don't understand the complexity of the grid. They don't understand that we're flirting with disaster because every time they've gone to flip the switch, the electricity's been there. These are the people that think milk comes from the store and electricity comes from the outlet. and they're not going to, as the dairy farm kid, that's like my like classic gripe, right?
Wow. You got a cow behind you. Works perfectly.
They're not going to reconsider any of these preconceived notions until the lights don't come on, right? And
well, it might be happening sooner than you think.
That's true. In the meantime, like, we need to be doing a better job of messaging to them about things that they actually care about. And I think the slavery angle is a big one, because 80% of the solar components that are made in the world come from China. Many of them come from Western China in the Xinjiang region, where you have enslaved Muslim Uyghurs. Like in Minnesota, there's a lot of people that have signs in their yard that says, I love my Muslim neighbor. And that's fine. But like, why are you totally cool with having solar panels on your roof then at the same time, right? Like, those are the moral issues.
I just watched an interview segment with Steve Malloy from junkscience.com. He's been on this podcast a couple of times, where he was basically brought on to be the counterpoint to some climate alarmists, one of them representing Extinction Rebellion. And at one point of the interview, the Extinction Rebellion guy said that the only thing standing in the way of going fully renewable was the government. And I was like, what? Like, that's the complete opposite of reality. The only reason that wind and solar makes up 6% of the energy makeup right now is because of massive government subsidies and mandates. So, Jim, I actually watched that clip because you recommended it. Thoughts on this idea of it being easy to transition?
Well, I mean,
you know what I mean.
Well, you know, it's easy to transition if you don't want anyone to have power. You could just do it, and that's apparently what our policy is in this country. It's just, we're just going to do it. You know, we're the only thing I had it on mute, but I was laughing. The only thing keeping us from going fully green and transitioning to this utopia that is impossible is the government is in the way. No, reality is in the way, and reality is going to win. You know, in a contest between what I would like the world to look like and what the world actually is, reality wins every time. And what we're going to see, which is the title of this podcast, getting you ready for summer blackouts, is that reality is going to start hitting more and more people around this country this summer. The idea of getting a blackout warning up here in Northern Illinois, where you've lived your whole life, you just never remembered it ever happening before. And now that's going to become a routine part of our lives. And we cannot energy efficiency our way out of this. We cannot replace coal and natural gas and nuclear power with, as Justin pointed out, wind and solar that takes massive amounts of land away from either agriculture. That actually destroys the environment. You destroy a hilltop to put windmills on it. You destroy farmland or, you know, wild prairie to put solar panels on them. You create just a tiny little postage stamp to make a coal or natural gas or a nuclear power plant. So these environmentalists don't actually care about the environment. They are either in fantasy land and delusional, or they want people to suffer because they have some kind of psychosis and collective guilt, or their own personal guilt that they're putting on the collective of the entire United States. We need to be punished for all of the prosperity that we've enjoyed for centuries. No, I'm not going to buy onto that, and most people won't either. We need politicians to stop trying to meet these radicals halfway and say, no, we are going to emit more CO2 in the atmosphere, and we're going to do it for the next 100 years so that we can keep a nice, steady economic growth going, so that maybe we can figure out other ways that are cheaper and more reliable to produce the energy we need to live and to thrive. We need politicians to say that publicly. Instead, we got a lot of milquetoast rhino Republicans who are trying to meet these radicals halfway. When you meet them halfway, they're just going to chop your head off. And that's what's going to happen.
There's this idea that we're using X amount of energy today. And so if we can just produce that energy in a different way, then everything will be fine. Even if you account for population growth and other things, there are many reasons to believe that energy use is actually going to get substantially higher than what we have right now, because so much of our technological development is energy intensive. And if you're looking at artificial intelligence, for example, and you're looking at automation, you're talking about replacing human beings with machines to do all kinds of different things. Those machines run on something. They run on electricity. And this is something that we've seen over the course of human history as well. Donnie just alluded to that. there's this idea that we're using more electricity. That's because our technological achievements and advancements are getting better and our quality of life is improving and people are living longer. All of these things are correlated with each other. They're all connected. The idea that we're better off using less energy is statistically, empirically, completely untrue. There is literally no evidence that using less electricity makes a society better off. It doesn't make a society better off. That's just not true. Now, we want to use it as efficiently as we possibly can, and actually artificial intelligence and other things will help us do that in the future. But if we really are going to move toward a society where we're going to have more automation and more artificial intelligence and more machine learning and more use and reliance on computers and all of the benefits that come from that, and there are many, there are drawbacks too, but there are many benefits that come from that, you're going to end up with significantly more energy use. That, coupled with population growth and the fact that the places in the world where there is the greatest amount of population growth are the places that really haven't developed all that much and they don't use that much energy. So just wait till they start using what the average person in America is using. Well, then you're really screwed. There's really no chance. And so again, none of these plans that are being presented to you from people who say, well, we just need to build windmills and solar panels. It's like, well, how many freaking windmills and solar panels are going to take to power the world when everyone is living like we are in 100 years from now or 150 years from now or whatever? When you have Africa and China, places like that, living to our standard of living or even half of that, what are you going to do then? You can't just build windmill. Eventually, you're going to run out of places to build windmills and solar panels. And so, and the last thing that I'll say about all of this is that one of the easiest ways of winning the argument is if you just don't care about the cost, or if you believe that cost is whatever the cost is for building new energy is worth doing it. Renewable energy is worth it because the alternative is, Miami being underwater and, millions of people dying and all climate refugees and all these things that these people are constantly claiming is going to happen. Even if you accept all that, then the simplest solution is just go all nuclear, because nuclear energy doesn't produce any carbon dioxide emissions, very little. It is truly renewable energy. It is proven to be safe. Relatively speaking, it's very safe and secure form of energy. You can build it almost anywhere. It doesn't require anywhere near as much land or mining or things like that as solar panels and wind farms and things like that. And so why not just do that? Why not just do that? And the obvious answer to that, and this is why people like Michael Schellenberger, who is a left-wing guy, really, but kind of realized that a lot of this stuff is garbage. Because he looked at the benefits of nuclear power and realized, I don't understand why the left isn't going along with it, is because nuclear power doesn't provide the opportunity to completely reshape all of society. And that's the whole point. That's the whole point. Joe Bast, who founded Heartland many years ago, used to say that the really great thing from the left's perspective about climate change is it just so happens that every single so-called solution to the problem gives the left everything that they've always wanted, even before the climate crisis existed. It's just so convenient for them, right? And that's the point. It's not really convenient. The whole narrative is being pushed because it gives them everything they've always wanted. And so they're going to keep going with this for as long as people allow, because if they actually win, they'll get everything that they've always wanted, tried all these other different arguments, and they didn't work. So now we go to this existential crisis. The only thing we can do to solve it is to give the left everything they want. And that's really where we're at. And so if we can just show people, and I think Isaac is exactly right about the humanitarian aspects of it. I think Donnie, he pointed out the environmental harms of this. These are the things we need to highlight. It can't just be about dollars and cents, because that doesn't win over a large segment of society. It has to be, look, this stuff is really bad for the environment. It's really bad for poor people, not just here in the United States, but around the world. And it's not sustainable at all. It isn't really going to solve the problem. It's going to kill lots of animals and take up massive amounts of land. And it requires human rights violations because all the stuff is being mined or produced, varying aspects of it, in parts of the world where they have no human rights standards or very low human rights standards. So I think focusing on those things is more important than anything else. And if we can just shift the narrative in those directions, I think that we can win this battle over the long run, because it really does come down to the average person who's voting for this just wants a cleaner environment. They're not going to get it from this. They just want to help people. They're not going to be able to do that from this. And they want to do something that's good for society generally, and that's not this. And if we can just make those points, the regular everyday person that's voting for these kinds of politicians making these grand promises is going to realize this is actually just a giant scam.
That is very, very well put. Very well. From the LA Times explaining what you should do in preparation of blackouts. But, after such a great little monologue there, I don't think it's worth bringing up. So, Isaac, I will give it to you, though, because you are our guest of honor. If you want to fill in any holes, any gaps, or anything like that, make any last points or anything, we're already north of an hour. Now is your opportunity.
He called me Snow Woman. And I said, hey, Donald Trump, the science is on my side, and I'd like to see how your hair would fare in a blizzard.
Oh, my gosh. We have Klobuchar. Amy Klobuchar just joined the podcast. Unbelievable. Are you going to be running for president again this upcoming year?
Yes, and I will announce with my hair as it fares in a blizzard.
Oh,
I'm part goat.
We gotta find that clip. That clip of all the different times that she's done that.
Oh my God, she's the cringiest.
Is one of the greatest things truly I've ever seen.
Oh my gosh, it was the absolute worst.